Hi, I'm Yoder and I am here with Fat Quarter Shop. And in my previous videos I shared how to hand quilt, and now we're going to take that another step further. We're going to talk about hand quilting and we're going to mix that with machine quilting. So I have put together a simple pieced little table topper. So this is what we are going to be making. You're going to need some supplies to make your table topper. I used a charm pack of Sugarcreek, and then you're also going to need some background fabric. I used Motabella 9900 200, and you're going to need 1/3 yard of that. And then if you notice on my topper, I've done a piped binding, and I'm actually going to be walking you through that piped binding later in the tutorial. So we need some supplies for that. What we're going to need, we need 2 prints. I'm going to pull this back up just a second again because I want to mention these. You're going to need your print that you're going to use for the piping, and then you're going to need a print to use for the larger portion of your binding. So for the piped portion and for the larger piece of binding, you are going to need 1/4 yard of each of those. You're also going to need batting and backing fabric, and you want a 20-inch piece of the batting and a 20-inch piece of your backing fabric. Once you have pulled all of those supplies together, you'll want to choose a coordinating thread. I use just a gray thread. Pull that back into the scene again so you can see that, just a gray thread for my quilting, and then a coordinating regular piecing weight thread that you'll be using for your machine quilting. So those are the supplies that you're going to need. Pull those together and I will be right with you to show you how you will need to cut those pieces to complete your table topper. Okay, so we're back. You've gathered your supplies together to complete your table topper, and now you need to know what to cut. So I'm going to show you what to cut for the blocks that we need for this table topper. We have 2 different blocks. We have a block A and we have a block B. Over here you see block A. For each A block you need 5 of them. For each one you need 1 3.5-inch print square, and you need 4 2-inch by 2-inch print squares. Of your background fabric, you're going to need 4 2-inch by 3.5-inch rectangles. That was 2-inch by 3.5-inch rectangles for your background. So I have gone ahead and cut the pieces that I needed for all 5 A blocks, and I have paired together my 3.5-inch squares and my 2-inch print squares into the pairs that I would like them within each block. For block B, we are just reversing our prints and our solids. So for block B, and you have 4 block Bs, you're going to need 1 of your 3.5-inch solid squares, and then you need 4 of your 2-inch by 2-inch solid squares, and then you also need 4 2-inch by 3.5-inch print squares per block B. Now, because the charm pack that I was working with, Sugarcreek, didn't have enough that I could use 1 print for all of those rectangles, I paired together the matching colors for each block as you see here. So I have 2 reds, 2 blues, 2 pinks, and 2 yellows, but the prints vary between those 2 prints. So you'll be using 8 different charm squares, and then you'll be cutting 2 2-inch by 3.5-inch rectangles from each charm square for your prints. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and pieced all of my A and B blocks. You're going to see I have the 5 A blocks here, and we're just alternating A's and B's, and then we have the 4 B blocks here. Now when you're piecing these together, when you're pressing, you're going to always press toward the prints. So you're pressing towards the prints, same for your B blocks, towards the prints, And then when you press your final seam on the A blocks, you're going to press that final seam away from the center, and when you press your final seam for the B blocks, you're going to press that seam toward the center. And that's going to allow us to nest all of our blocks together when we're sewing together our rows. So you can go ahead and sew your rows together, and we'll be right back to talk more about quilting. I'm back with my completed table topper. It's all pieced together, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the quilting on the topper. So we're going to be combining hand quilting and machine quilting together, and you might be wondering, why would we ever want to combine the 2? You might want to combine them for a couple different reasons. Number one, sometimes it just adds a little cuteness factor mixing the 2 together. You can do straight line machine quilting, but you could also do free motion machine quilting. So you could have your hand quilting and then, you know, some fancy swirly bits and bobs spread out throughout your project. So that's one reason. It can add some cuteness. We all want the cuteness in our quilts. Another reason that you might opt to combine the two is maybe you're a little bit pressed for time, but you want to add a little bit of hand quilting. So you do a little machine and a little bit of hand. And that's another reason that you might want to combine the two. What I like to do when I am combining machine and hand quilting is to do the hand quilting first. Some people will prefer to switch that, and they'll look at their hand quilting kind of as their basting, their quilt top in place, and then they'll come back in with their machine quilting first. But depending on what type of machine quilting you are doing, you might run into a little bit of problem with the denseness of the machine quilting and then having to work your hand quilting stitches in around the machine quilting. And so for that reason, I prefer to do my hand quilting first, just so I have the mobility that I need to do that part. So what I've done, I'm gonna pull this guy into screen for you. What I've done here is I have gone ahead and I have marked and hand quilted the portions of this topper that I wanted to hand quilt. If you have any questions about hand quilting, I've done some previous videos with Fat Quarter Shop about hand quilting, so make sure that you check those out if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, or if you want a refresher and you want to review what we've talked about with hand quilting previously. So you can see I've used my washable fabric marker to mark my hand quilting, and I've gone ahead and just hand quilted it right away. My backing and my batting are at least an inch around my top, and I've gone ahead and sandwiched, marked, quilted, and now we're actually ready to do the machine quilting, mark the lines for machine quilting, and then machine quilt next. One quick thing before I move on to the machine quilting, I used this Aurifil gray thread for my hand quilting. It's in my Sunny Stitches thread box, and it perfectly coordinates with the Sugarcreek fabrics that you see here that I've used. And for this one, sometimes I like to mix up my thread colors, but I really wanted to just stick with one thread color. So, feel free to change things up from project to project. Sometimes you might just want one color, and sometimes you might want more than one. So I wanted to show off my hand quilting first of all. So that's why you see I've marked down through a lot of the white space, and that's where I've decided to hand quilt. And then we're gonna mark down through the diagonals of our print sections here, and then all the way down across the whole thing. And those are gonna be the parts that we are going to end up machine quilting. As I've mentioned previously, when I mark, I like to just go as long as I can. So this is the longest ruler I have on hand, and I'm just gonna line up with the points here and just run a line straight down through the points using my Mark Be Gone marker. Sometimes your lid gets away from you. Stick that back on or set it to the side if it's really being fussy. And we'll just go ahead and mark down through here. And then just line it back up and get that last little corner up there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and mark the same angle up here. Now when you're marking up here, I want to mention this because this threw me off a little bit when I started marking quilts. You can see right up here, it seems like you'd want your mark to come right through that intersection here and here, but actually once you add on your binding, where it's laying right now is how you're going to want that to run. So line up your points here, and then you're going to notice it's going to be about a 1/4 inch off, but that's what you want, so don't be alarmed when you see that. And just go ahead and mark that. And then I'm going to come down here and mark this little one down here, and again you're going to see how these are going to line up around the perimeter. And then we're just going to pivot our project and repeat going in the opposite direction. So I'll mark that center one first. And if I have a big project I'm working on, I'll oftentimes just lay it out on the floor and use the solid surface of the floor to mark. When you're doing little projects, it's nice. Sometimes I'll use my kitchen countertop to mark something little if I need a little bit bigger than my cutting table for space. I'll just mark those. I'll go up here and mark this one. And the bottom corner. And you can do this as densely or as non-densely, I'm not sure that's a word, as you want. And you can always go back in and add more. If you were to start quilting and it's just not quite as much quilting as you want, you could come back in and you could add some more machine quilting. You could add more hand quilting in there if you wanted to. I'm gonna go over that line just a little bit right there because he skipped a little bit. And then once you have it marked, you're ready to go over to your machine and do your machine quilting. So I've come over to my machine. I've got the hand quilting done. I'm going to go ahead and add the machine quilting onto this. And I'm just gonna start, we're gonna do the 2 center lines first and then work our way out from the center. I like to set my stitch length just a little bit longer than 2, maybe that's 2.5 or something like that. I think that's just purely aesthetic, whatever stitch you like. I probably wouldn't go too small because machine quilting is a little bit trickier if your stitches are too small, so I wouldn't do that, but maybe somewhere between a 2, 2.5, something like that. And you can use a walking foot for this if you want to. I've been very happy using a walking foot, but I don't always use one. So today I'm showing you without using one. But if you like using a walking foot, then by all means, go ahead. We're just gonna start here. And I don't tend to go too fast. Another thing I'll stop and say too is I have like gardening gloves at home that I will sometimes use if I'm doing machine quilting. I know there's other products that people like using, so if you find that you're having a hard time, like, or it's shifty or it doesn't want to glide through nicely, you might try using something on your hands that have a little bit more grip. For a small project, I usually tend to skip it as I find I prefer that on larger projects, but it's something to keep in mind. And you're just following the lines that you've marked. Because we've hand quilted it, everything is basted, it's spray basted and it's hand quilted, so everything is just staying in place really nicely. And we're just gonna take it out. And then I'm gonna come through here and I'm just gonna do the other diagonal that runs across the whole quilt, and that's just gonna secure everything here for me. And then I'll work my way out from the center. So now we just have to do these little guys around the outside edges and our machine quilting will be done. So I'm just gonna go ahead and work my way around. There we go. Just that quick, your machine quilting is done. Now we're ready to go over and trim this up, and I will show you how to do that piped binding. Okay, I'm back with my completed hand quilted and machine quilted table topper, and now we just need to trim this up. Now I oftentimes don't worry about squaring up quilts or toppers or pillows or anything when I make projects, but sometimes it's nice to know how you could go about doing that if you wanted to make sure that your project was nice and square. So we are going to square this up as we go. So what you'll do, you'll want to line up your ruler over here and line it up as it goes down through here. And then you can also check and see how this line lines up down at the top or bottom of your project. And you just want everything to be nice and tidy. You can see that my ruler is running nice and straight down through this seam. Everything is lining up as it should. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that right now. I'll just back that off a little bit there. And then I'm gonna come down through. And then we're just gonna pivot this around and do that on every side. So we'll line up here, we'll line up down here. You can see that my edge is running nicely, like the same distance past that 18-inch mark right there. Everything is tidy here. Everything is nice and lined up for me, so I'll go ahead and trim there. We'll do the next side. In my previous hand quilting videos, I talked about how we make our sandwiches using the 505 spray base that I like to use. So if you missed out on that, make sure you check those videos out. And everything's tidy again here. We're lining up nice and straight. So I'm just gonna go ahead and trim here. One last side. It all looks good to me, so we'll go ahead and trim that off. And then we're ready to add that piped binding. There we go. Join me for the next segment for that pipe binding.